Hi, I'm Elyse, a Chicagoland native, real estate agent for the past 10 years, and I help people make great choices about real estate. If you're a homeowner here in Plainfield, Illinois, and you're thinking about selling your house in the near future, here's some things to consider to get you started. First, you're going to start with a conversation with a real estate agent. You may decide that you want to interview multiple agents to get a different take and get different viewpoints on what makes sense for your home. You may decide that you've got a great vibe or you've got a referral from someone that you already trust and you just want to interview one agent. During that conversation, what you're looking for is some insight into how that person is going to walk you through the process. Every single agent has a different way of doing things. As real estate agents, we operate as independent contractors, which means that you're going to get a wide spread of experience, a wide spread of processes, a wide spread of systems, and it's up to you to decide who you want to trust in that situation. There's no one size fits all when it comes to real estate agents. You're working with someone on transferring the largest asset that you probably own, and you want to make sure that you feel good throughout the process, that you trust this individual, that you like their approach, and that you guys are all on the same page with what you're going to be doing in order to get your home sold. That conversation should include an idea on how to best prepare your home for sale. There's not going to be a one size fits all, but they should give you some guidance on recommendations on things you have to do, on things that you probably want to do, and some things that you may want to consider if it makes sense for you. You should be able to ask them plenty of questions about what they are going to do to sell your home, about the way that they work in their business, their systems, their processes, their experience. It's really a time to get to know them and get to know what they're going to do to sell your home. Some things to consider when it comes to selling your home here in Plainfield. First off, timing. We are a very seasonally driven real estate market. Spring market in Chicagoland typically happens from about Valentine's Day until Memorial Day. From Memorial Day until 4th of July, we kind of level off, and then we start to see a slow dip from 4th of July through the start of the school year. After Labor Day, we get a little bit of a pickup again until Halloween, and then we really start to trickle downwards from Halloween until it starts all over again at Valentine's Day. You're gonna have some pros and cons in every single season. When you sell in the height of spring market, you have got the benefit of increasing home values. You've got the benefit of the largest pool of buyers out looking for properties. People that are sensitive to selling around the school cycles are going to be out looking at this time of year. You're also going to have the largest amount of competition that you will see. So you need to decide along with your real estate agent if your particular home and your particular goals and timeline make sense to push for that spring market, or if you're going to be better served going with a fall or possibly a winter market. When you sell in the winter months, you've got a couple benefits there as well. People out there looking at homes during the winter months usually need to buy. So you may end up with less buyers coming through and a higher quality of buyers that are viewing your property. You're also going to see a lot less competition. Most sellers decide that they're going to sell to work around the school cycle or to maximize that spring market seasonality. The ones that are selling during the winter months are usually a need to sell. They're driven by jobs, by life changes, things like that, but there tends to be less competition. So if you've got a property that shines, it may make sense for you to sell during those winter months. The other benefit to selling in the winter is that most of the corporate relocations tend to happen during that timeline. A lot of corporate relocations are going to follow a January 1st start date. And so you'll see families decide that they're going to start looking for homes in late October to early November so that they can close and move in between semesters for their kids and so that they can be on site ready to start at their new corporate location January 1st. Other things to consider when it comes to selling your house are going to be preparation. Every seller needs to do a little bit of preparation. Typically, the bare minimum is going to be to clean out and declutter. From there, you need to decide what makes sense for you in terms of advanced preparation. Does that mean things like making some minor updates and upgrades? Things like carpet, paint, they can go a long way depending on your particular home. You may also decide that it makes sense to do some larger upgrades, things like maybe a bathroom facelift or doing a little bit of work in your kitchen to make it a little bit more modern, a little bit more updated. You may decide that you need to work on some of your mechanicals. Right now in 2026, we're having a lot of issues with older roofs, making homes nearly uninsurable or making the cost of insurance a huge barrier to entry for buyers. If your roof is more than 20 years old, you may be in a situation where it is going to drastically limit your buyer pool if you don't have that replaced. That's a conversation that you should be having and thinking about in advance. And you'll do that in a partnership along with your real estate agent to get that added guidance. Other things to consider when it comes to preparing your home for sale are going to be your curb appeal. If you are talking to your real estate agent in the winter months, you're going to want to think through, when is your home going on the market? If it's going on the market in February or March, the very beginning of our spring market, when things haven't started to green up, you don't need to do quite as much as if it's going on the market in June or July. When it goes on the market in June or July, usually buyers are going to hang out in the backyard while they are discussing the property. They're going to pay a lot more attention to those things when they're standing outside and discussing with their significant other, with their trusted advisors, if they want to buy the home. A lot of times those conversations in the winter months or in the very early parts of spring market happen inside. And so your yard doesn't need to be quite as pristine in those situations. Other things to consider by way of preparing your home for sale are things like value maximization. Those are going to be those little details that you can change, upgrade, tweak, and adjust in order to make sure that you are selling for the highest value possible while investing the amount that only makes sense. It doesn't make sense to go do a $100,000 kitchen remodel in order to only increase the value of your home by $70,000. So you want to have those conversations in advance to think through and talk through what makes sense for you by way of investing. Now let's talk the cost of selling your house. Here in Chicagoland, you're going to see real estate commissions vary by a very large amount. Everything from $200 on a flat fee on the low end up to 5 or 6% for the seller side only on the high end. From there, there should be a drastic difference in both what you are receiving for your cost and the experience, qualifications, and success level of the agent that you are hiring. For example, a brand new agent that doesn't have quite as much experience should be a little bit cheaper than an agent that's been doing this for a long time. At the very high end of that fee, you should be seeing a drastic uptick in the kind of marketing that's going to be done for your home. From there, it's up to you as the seller to decide what makes sense for your home. For example, drone photography and drone videography is a big hot topic in real estate right now. And for some properties, it makes a lot of sense. If you've got a property with a very vast, grand estate, you've got multiple outbuildings, you've got acreage, all of those details, yes, it makes sense to do those over and above drone photos and videos. On the flip side, if you're in a traditional neighborhood where your lots are about a quarter of an acre, probably doesn't make sense to do all of those extra things, because typically speaking, when you zoom out and do a drone photo of a neighborhood like that, all you see is a sea of homes, and it can really give buyers the perception that there's not a lot of privacy, which is something that most buyers tend to be looking for. So it may not make sense for you to pay that extra fee for that kind of marketing in your particular home. This is something that you should be able to ask questions about, and you should be able to get an answer from your agent about their strategy on why they're choosing to invest these extra dollars in the marketing. It should be a partnership. You should be able to ask questions and get very clear answers on that. When should you start the process of having the conversation with a real estate agent and preparing to sell your home? A lot of this is going to depend on the particular seller, but typically speaking, we start the conversations with our sellers between 2 and 6 months before we go on the market. Some of our sellers like to be extremely proactive. They are very detail oriented. They may choose to start the conversation up to a year in advance of going on the market. Some sellers decide that they want to do all of the work themselves, hire an agent, and put on the market just a few days later. Typically speaking, I think your best bet is to reach out at least a month in advance, have a conversation with the agent, get the agent's take on what you should be doing so that you're not investing time and energy and resources unnecessarily. That conversation should happen, like I said, for us, I think it's best 1 to 3 months before you want to go on the market. Finally, a couple little nuances to keep in mind here in Plainfield, Illinois, if you are planning on selling your home. First and foremost, schools. Schools make a huge difference in Plainfield. Plainfield has multiple different school districts that are feeding into it. You've got a little bit of the Naperville schools, a little bit of the Bolingbrook schools, a little bit of the Joliet schools, and a little bit of the Oswego schools, in addition to the main Plainfield school system. All of those will have an impact on your home value, okay? The other nuances when it comes to the schools in Plainfield are going to be broken down mainly by the high schools. We have 4 main high schools here in the Plainfield school system. All of them have a different public perception. All of them will play into the strategy when it comes to selling your home. Another nuance here in Plainfield when it comes to the schools is the possibility of redistricting. So right now, here in early 2026, there's a lot up in the air about if schools are going to be redistricted, how that's going to look, and what that may end up looking like for buyers that are buying homes in the area down the road. If your home is in one of those areas that could potentially be bumped from one high school to another, you're going to see a potential shift in your home values. That's something that you need to be aware of, that you need to be asking questions about, and that your agent should be using in conversations when it comes to valuing and strategizing around the sale of your home. Other little Plainfield nuances here are going to be the specific location. So we see a very different buyer pool when we get south of Renwick on 59. And a lot of time that is because of accessibility to transportation. When you get south of Renwick, you start having a harder time getting onto the highway system, thus reducing the amount of commuters that are interested in buying in that area. And so you'll start to see that play into it a little bit as well. The other thing that we'll see by way of location nuances here are the further west that you go. Typically speaking, when you go further west of Ridge Road, you're going to start seeing a decrease in accessibility to day-to-day amenities like restaurants, grocery stores, convenience stores, all of those items. That is going to change your buyer pool. It tends to keep the home values a little bit more affordable, or it makes for buyers that are interested in potentially newer homes and newer growth. So that tends to be a buyer that is looking for a long-term purchase as opposed to someone that wants to be here for maybe only 3 to 5 years. If you have any questions about what you've seen here or would like a second set of eyes on your sale plan, feel free to reach out. Our contact information is in the link below.